Contrary to popular belief, Abraham Lincoln is not universally beloved. Many Southerners resent his treatment of the South. Others see him as an enemy of states' rights. And, despite having freed the slaves, many on the left today see him as racist. Life Stories of American Presidents presents the story of Abraham Lincoln, 1809 to 1865. Death and destruction swept across the land as brother fought against brother in the most devastating civil war the world had ever seen. The nation found the courage to survive, found it in the heart of Abraham Lincoln. Born in 1809, Abe Lincoln was the son of a poor Kentucky farmer. He is only 7 when his father leads the family across the Ohio to carve a homestead in the wilderness of Indiana. In this new country, Abe works hard and sprouts like a stalk of corn. Tom, your boy Abe can sink an axe deeper into wood than any man I ever saw. You'd think there were 3 men working by the way those trees fall. And when neighborhood youngsters challenge him to a rough and tumble fight, I'm the big buck of this lick. If anyone else wants to try it, come on and wet your horns. Abe learns to read in the frontier blab school. He loves books. What do you see in those books anyway, Abe? Everything I wanted to know was in this book. But the young giant learns from life too. Before he is 21, he has made 2 trips down the Mississippi to New Orleans aboard a flatboat. And once we sell this food cargo, we'll have ourselves a real time. Reckon there's a lot I'd like to see in a big city like New Orleans. In busy New Orleans, Lincoln sees things he will never forget. Human beings offered for sale like cattle. In 1831, young Abe arrives at New Salem, Illinois. He works there several years as a clerk, storekeeper, postmaster, and surveyor. After brief service in the Black Hawk War, Abe returns to New Salem and is elected to the state legislature. He keeps reading books, learning. Another book, Abe. A law book this time. Reckon if I study hard enough, I might be a lawyer someday. By 1837, Abe Lincoln has become a lawyer. He becomes a familiar figure in frontier courtrooms. So you saw the defendant commit murder by the light of the full moon? And yet, this almanac shows there was no moon shining on the night in question. In 1847, Lincoln is elected to Congress. When he returns home, the frontier has left Illinois behind. Yet, amidst all this peace and plenty, Lincoln is deeply troubled. Dear Josh, you remember that steamboat and the shackled slaves we saw? The sight is a continual torment to me. I see something like it each time I touch the Ohio. Abe feels deeply the injustice of slavery. One day, he faces the governor of Illinois. The case is simple, sir. This woman's son was a free man when he hired on that Mississippi steamboat, but because he didn't have his freedom papers with him, the New Orleans police jailed him. Abe, I've just received word from the governor of Louisiana. He can take no action. There's nothing I can do. Governor, whether you release this boy or not, I tell you, I'll make this country too hot for slavery. The Dred Scott decision makes Lincoln angry. He joins the newly formed Republican Party and runs for Senate against Stephen Douglas in 1858. The Dred Scott decision is only one of 1,000 things being done to make the public think of the Negro as nothing but property to be bought and sold anywhere in this country. The issue is the old struggle between two principles, the common rights of humanity and the divine right of kings, which says, you toil and earn bread, and I'll eat it. Though Lincoln wins the popular vote, Douglas becomes senator because of complicated election laws. But others fight slavery with far more violent weapons. In 1859, John Brown strikes at Harper's Ferry. After the raid, John Brown faces his captors defiantly. So you came to free the slaves in the South, eh, Brown? You're a mad, fanatical seditionist and a traitor. It's the South that's mad and fanatical. Is it fine to keep 5 million men in slavery? John Brown is hanged, but his daring electrifies the North. In 1860, the Republicans meet, and in the South, the slave owners are grim at the news. This Lincoln says he will try to preserve the Union. Bah! He's nothing but an abolitionist. If Lincoln is elected, the entire South will secede. Lincoln is elected president. Within weeks, the slave states begin to break away. South Carolina secedes. Georgia and Louisiana raise money for men and arms, all South joining the Confederacy. As the inauguration approaches, Lincoln starts for Washington, but as his train heads southward, Mr. Lincoln, I have just come here from Baltimore. There is a plot to assassinate you if the train stops there. I didn't think they would go that far. Bypassing Baltimore, Lincoln stops secretly into Washington. He begins to deal with the problem of secession. Mr. President, South Carolina demands that we surrender Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. General Scott, Fort Sumter is the property of the United States. It must be defended to the last man. On April 12, 1861, Carolina troops bombard Fort Sumter. The Civil War has begun. The North rallies behind Lincoln. Even such opponents as Stephen Douglas offer support. Mr. President, I have often opposed you, but I support your attempt to preserve the Union. Thank you, Mr. Douglas. I have called up 75,000 state militiamen to put down this rebellion. At Lincoln's call, people across the nation swarm into the streets, public squares, and meeting halls. Hurrah for Abe Lincoln! Defend the Union! Down with the slaveholders! But the capital is surrounded by slave states. Within a few days, all telegraph lines and railroads to Washington are cut by Confederate sympathizers. Days pass. Confederate forces mass near the capital, while Lincoln waits impatiently for aid from the North. Help is coming. New York and Rhode Island are sending troops. Why do they take so long at it? Washington could be taken by the Confederacy at any moment. I don't believe there is any North. New York's 7th Regiment is a myth. Rhode Island isn't in my geography any longer. Then, on April 25th, there they are, Mr. President, the 7th Regiment from New York, the Massachusetts Brigade, and 1,200 Rhode Islanders. And Washington is safe. Praise heaven. But the Union Army is green and inexperienced, and in the opening battle of Bull Run, they break and run. The next few months are marked by more bitter defeats, indecisive battles, and costly victories for the Union Army. Second Bull Run, Manassas, Antietam, the Peninsula. Then, in January 1863, Lincoln strikes another blow at the Confederacy, the Emancipation Proclamation. And I do order and declare that all persons held as slaves within the designated states are and henceforward shall be free. But that spring brings bitter news of a new defeat at Chancellorsville. The casualty list, sir. So many thousands of dead and wounded. And what will the country say? But the tide of battle turns. The boys in blue are winning their share of victories too. Gettysburg, Shiloh, Vicksburg, Chattanooga. On the battlefield of Gettysburg, Lincoln speaks to the nation. We highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. Early in 1864, Lincoln summons Ulysses S. Grant, the fighting general who has scored victories at Vicksburg, Shiloh, and Chattanooga. General Grant, the country wants you to take Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy. Can you do it? Give me the men I'll need and I'll take Richmond. In the spring, Grant crosses the Rapidan River into the wilderness of Spotsylvania. As the first reports of fighting trickle through, Lincoln is stunned. 20,000 men killed and wounded in a few days of fighting. I can't bear it. I can't. But Grant's determined attack drives Robert E. Lee's Confederate Army to the gates of Richmond. When Lincoln visits the victorious army, he sees the first fruits of the Emancipation Proclamation. Negro troops, sir, they have fought bravely. Hurrah for Father Abraham! The day of Jubilee has come. Lincoln is re-elected for a second term. Then, at Christmas, General Sherman completes his march through the South and take this telegram to the President. As a Christmas gift, my army is presenting him with the captured city of Savannah, 150 cannon, and 25,000 bales of cotton. Estimates of the total death count of the American Civil War range from 650,000 to 850,000, most of the casualties being young white men. Meanwhile, Grant has defeated Lee at Richmond and driven him backward toward Appomattox. Though the Southern Army fights with desperate courage, they are without food or supplies. Lee has no choice but to surrender. Lee's surrender means the end of the war. News of Appomattox brings rejoicing to the North. Hurrah for old Abe! But soon, ugly rumors sweep Washington. But we have the proof, sir. A Confederate Secret Service man says he knows of a plot to assassinate you. I've heard such talk before. Look here. I've got 80 or more letters threatening my life. Yet, at that very moment, a plot is hatching. Then it's decided. I'll handle Lincoln myself. Payne, your job is to kill Seward Azerot. I'm leaving Johnson to you. On the night of April 14th, the conspirators strike. John Wilkes Booth slips into the president's box at the Ford Theater. And so, Lincoln, too, gave his life for the Union. But he left one last message for his countrymen. With malice towards none, with charity for all. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, and to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations.